Good morning and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akhari-Delwale. The headlines. Russia blames saboteurs for orchestrating a series of explosions in the Russian-annexed region of Crimea. Antonio Guterres is to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky and Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ukraine tomorrow. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and ending the conflict with Russia is on the agenda. And Poland wants Ukraine to admit genocide in the Second World War. Volyn massacres, when more than 130,000 ethnic Poles were allegedly massacred by the Ukrainian army. Welcome once again to the program. Russia's defense ministry is blaming saboteurs for explosions at a military warehouse in northern Crimea that forced the evacuation of more than 3,000 people. According to the ministry, the explosions rocked an ammunition storage facility near the village of Moskye and disrupted train services and power supplies, although nobody was seriously injured. The incidents followed a series of explosions last week at the Russian-operated airbase in Crimea, which Ukrainian officials had hinted were part of some kind of special operation, but which Moscow said at the time was an accident. The state-owned news agency TASS cites the Russian Defense Ministry as saying that civilian infrastructure had been damaged as a result of the sabotage, a rare admission that armed groups loyal to Ukraine are inflicting losses on military logistics and supply lines inside Crimea. Last week, blasts at a military airbase on the western coast of Crimea caused extensive damage and destroyed several Russian warplanes. Moscow had called that an accident, though simultaneous blasts left craters visible from space. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that various reasons could be behind the explosions in Crimea and warned people in occupied territories to stay away from Russian military sites. Moscow denounced sabotage and Ukraine hinted at responsibility for new explosions at a military base that is an important supply line for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. According to officials and news agencies, the blasts engulfed an ammunition depot at a military base, disrupting trains and forcing evacuations from a nearby village. The explosions raised the prospects of new dynamics in a 6-month-old war if Ukraine now has the capacity to strike deeper into Russian territory, or pro-Kiev groups are having success with guerrilla-style attacks.
Причини вибухів на окупованій території можуть бути різні, дуже різні, в тому числі, цитую...
The reasons for the explosions in the occupied territory can be different, very different. In particular, I quote the definition of the occupiers themselves, Zaporizhzhia, but all of them bear the same sense. The destruction of the occupiers' logistics, the ammunition, military and other equipment, and commanders' posts save the lives of our people. The fewer opportunities the occupiers have to spread evil and kill Ukrainians, the sooner we'll be able to end this war by liberating our land. And the cue to leave Crimea for Russia and cross the bridge these days proves that the absolute majority of citizens of the terrorist state already understand, or at least still feel, that Crimea is not a place for them. Because the leadership of Russia expects that Ukrainians, Europeans, and the whole world will feel tired from this war, we therefore must do everything so that it is not us or our friends and partners who get tired, but our enemy. Today, the Russian army continued its absolutely senseless and brutal shelling of the cities of the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk region. Unfortunately, there are victims. Shelling of Kharkiv and the border area continues, but all of this gives nothing to the occupiers, and it won't break our resistance.
And as experts from the International Atomic Energy Agency are being sent to Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, French President Emmanuel Macron said he supports such developments. Moscow, which accuses Kiev of repeatedly shelling the Russia-controlled facility, has stated it would welcome such a mission. Speaking by phone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Mr. Macron expressed concern over the presence of Russian troops at the nuclear plant, citing the, quote, threat posed by their presence and actions there. The French leader also called for the withdrawal of Moscow's military personnel from the facility. Mr. Macron also gave his backing to a proposal made earlier by the IAEA Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi to send the watchdog's experts to the site as soon as possible. According to a transcript published by the French president's office, Mr. Macron discussed the terms of such a mission with his Ukrainian counterpart. Russian forces seized the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in early March, soon after Moscow launched the military campaign against Ukraine. In the meantime, Russia is rejecting claims by Ukrainian officials and a former U.S. embassy employee about nuclear power theft. The Russian Foreign Ministry says the claims of Moscow bombing the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in order to, quote, steal Ukraine's electricity, published by the Wall Street Journal, makes no sense. The WSJ, citing Ukrainian leaders, international nuclear-powered experts, and the plant's staff, said recent artillery attacks on the plants, which Moscow controls, are a, quote, deliberate step in Russia's wider goal, which is stealing Zaporizhzhia's power by severing its connection to Ukraine's remaining territory. However, Russia's foreign ministry has termed the report a complete demolition of the connection between cause and effect, dubbing the WSJ claims the latest spin in the wheel of disinformation. Those quoted on the record include Mikhail Podolyak, advisor to Ukrainian president and former energy chief at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, Surya Yayante. The journal also claims to have spoken with plant workers, family members, and colleagues who fled to safety, meaning Ukrainian-held territory. And as the fighting goes on, both Russia and Ukraine continue to claim attacks on each side. Russian forces have continued to attack multiple Ukrainian military targets with high-precision weapons, while Ukraine has said that its armed forces had repelled Russian attacks in several directions. Russia's defense ministry said in a daily release that the Russian aerospace forces used high-precision weapons to hit command and observation posts of the 3rd and 46th Air Mobility Brigade of the Ukrainian Army in Kherson, as well as a temporary deployment point of the brigade. The Russian forces also carried out concentrated strikes on the positions of the Ukrainian 72nd Motorized Infantry Brigade in the Donetsk region. In a Ukrainian position in Donetsk, the Russian forces found some French-made anti-tank mines. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, on the other hand, said that their forces had repelled the Russian attacks in the directions of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Bakhmut, while the fighting in the direction of Avdiivka and Zaporizhzhia was still in progress. Let's talk now to Major General Augustin Agundu, Honorary Special Advisor on Intelligence to the Plateau State Governor. He's also a consultant with Defense Headquarters. General Agundu, of course, was former commander of Operation Safe Haven. Good morning to you, General. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. Happy to be with you again.
The last time I spoke to you, this war was more or less just getting underway. And at that time, you had expressed the hope that perhaps it could be stopped. But 6 months down the line, it's still ongoing, and it looks like the theater is widening because the Ukrainians are now counter-attacking. What do you make of this?
No. Thank you very much. That is to show you what it means when you are defending the territorial integrity of your state, of your nation. And you see the force with which the Ukrainian forces are withholding the Russian advances and all whatnot. So they know what they are fighting for, and they know that the survival of their nation is at stake.
In that situation, as a retired officer yourself, I'm sure you are familiar with the strategy here. The Russians had attempted to go for the head at the beginning, which was their drive towards Kiev.
Yes.
That proved difficult.
Yes.
So they then withdrew to the south, where they seem to have some Russian-speaking people who could back there.
That's right.
But now the Ukrainians, as I said, seem to be trying to confine them to that.
Yes.
In the long run, is that, in your view, a sustainable strategy, considering that, in spite of what we've said, the Russians still have superiority of weapons and personnel?
Exactly. But unfortunately, equipment, weapons, and personnel do not win wars. equipment do not win wars. It is the courage to withstand the advancing troops, the courage to soldier on, the courage to defend the territory. You have a cause that you are fighting for. That is what wins wars. And in that same way, that is why military forces all over the world will keep on training and retraining in order to grow expertise, in order to also grow those new, you have that dexterity to withhold your ground. So we cannot compare the strength of Russian armed forces and that of the Ukrainians in no small measure. But then a lot of fears. What has happened now is that perhaps the Russians have withdrawn to strategize for a greater, like we said from the beginning, it's supposed to have ended within, do not forget the Russians called these special operations.
They weren't expecting that.
They weren't expecting such a resistance from the Ukrainians. And then, since you have a cause from their own side, they have a cause that they are fighting, and the Ukrainians are withholding that cause not to hold water, that means probability that the Russians might come with a heavier fourth generation, a heavier weaponry, a weapon. I don't want to talk what is going to be very difficult to defend.
Yeah. Now, given that situation, you had expressed the hope that this could still be resolved by some kind of peace, and I know that at that time we also talked about your role in Operation Safe Haven, which was about enforcing some kind of peace. But it does appear, I know that in the recent past, intelligence has come to play. A lot of what the Russians are accusing the Ukrainians of doing in Crimea now is possible only by a great deal of intelligence. Again, your experience in this regard, how much of that do you think is really going on now?
You see, intelligence itself is remains work in progress. You know, most often when we talk about intelligence, we look at the probability of working out or that situations have developed and you need to nip the situation in bud. But intelligence is continuous. It is that it brings you to that state of having that capability to also scale up your intelligence with all the probabilities that require that connotes intelligence, and then that will make you understand what exactly you are going to do with such intelligence. So we allow situations to go our way, and then we start talking about intelligence. But it's a continuous thing that we. But what has the world, in the case of Russia and Ukraine, what has the world done with all the intelligence assets available? They saw it coming, and nobody was able to nip it in the bud. And if you look at even the Second World War, the inability of going into peacemaking is what led to that period of Cold War and all the antagonism that we had during that time. So it's very important that we, the planners and also policy makers, should look at devastating effect of going a particular stride as against peacemaking and resolution, and do not forget at the end,
you have to come to the table.
That's right.
But sometimes there are those who I have spoken to who have said that, look, yes, possibly nearer the beginning that the chances for doing that were very high. But that now, 6 months or so down the line, the two sides cannot climb down because the stakes have become much higher the more time has gone. More people have been killed, more resources have been expended, more territory has been destroyed, and that therefore peace is harder. Is that your view too, or are you more optimistic?
Yes, peace is harder now because do not forget that there are national interests. There are also, do we say national ego? There are things that they are pursuing. And do not forget there are also other contending issues that are making it more difficult. Yeah. Then these things are going to make it, there is, unfortunately, from my own assessment, peace is far away from both sides because none will want to give up. Ukrainians are fighting for the survival of this. And even going into to recapture Crimea, they lost 2014. how could you have waited this long to make or is it that the international community did not answer them appropriately
at that time?
At that time, 2014, and it's already annexed, and people are already living normal, and now you realize that after all, it is part of my country. I want to. So there's a lot of dynamics within the international, and we have to be very careful. When you look at what happened towards the tail end, sometimes we don't learn from history. The tail end of Second World War is what is playing out now. And you remember, it took Japan to bomb Pearl Harbor, destroy American warship, and that dragged America into the war itself. And then eventually we went into the Cold War. Then we went into Korea War, which became even a proxy war.
Yes.
Between the North, supported by Russia, and the West, the South Korea, supported by
the United States.
So this is what is playing out. So how far are we going now? We must be very careful.
In all of this, and you mentioned that when you talked about proxy, the Ukrainians, it's obvious that the Ukrainians could not have withstood the Russians all on their own. They've had significant military support from the Western powers, the US, Europe principally. The Russians have had their own support, although those who are supporting them have remained a little bit more behind the scenes. They have not been front and center. But as you said, there's national ego now involved. What would you prescribe as steps that could lead to some kind of, maybe first of all, a truce while talks go on? Because some of those I've spoken to have also said that the chances of peace talks while war is still ongoing tends to be quite low. Given your own experience at the level of peace building and enforcement and so on, what would be the steps that you recommend?
The first step that must go on, certain things have to go on simultaneously. And certain individuals have to play certain roles.
Right.
For instance, you see the role that Turkey is playing in the whole thing. And in the first phase, because world food hunger is there, and then suddenly Turkey is the new bride on the table, and you see the extent at which shipment of grains is being monitored from point of departure to arrival, and you see even the military coordinating center that is established for this purpose, and suddenly there is a relax. Even if you look at the world economy, there's some kind of a little turn because grains are moving and people are having hope and all kind of. I think Africa is getting some shipment load now into the. Now these are to show you we don't need to stop the war before talking peace. If people are dying of hunger, or perhaps in the foreseeable future that there is going to be greater dangers regarding world hunger, and then food is being shipped, at the same time, we could open another channel for peace, to allow peace, to allow discussions, while the men are in the front. And do not forget again, even during the Second World War, a time comes when they say, okay, this is Christmas, no one is going to fight. Or this is morning hours, the English like taking their English morning tea. And within that time, no one, let us put in a lot of compromises have to come in play. The humanitarian dangers that have taken place now is unprecedented. Let's not talk about properties and all this, but let's talk about the psyche of the humans that have been damaged. A lot of persons might not recover from that for a long time to come. So how long are we going to continue to this? A channel towards peace needs to be opened. And that is going to be a first step, perhaps a breakthrough we might get.
Indeed. On that optimistic note, we'll have to leave it there. Major General Augustine Agundu, thank you so much for your time this morning, for coming into our studios.
It's my pleasure.
Still to come on the program, the European Union is furious over Turkish trade with Russia, accuses it of taking advantage of US-EU embargoes against Moscow. Join us again. Thank Thanks for staying and welcome back. A United Nations spokesman says UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will be meeting Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine tomorrow. Stefan Dujarric announced that at the invitation of President Zelensky, the Secretary General will be in Kiev to attend a trilateral meeting with President Erdogan of Turkey as well as the Ukrainian leader. Mr. Dujarric said the trio will visit on Friday the Black Sea port of Odessa, where grain exports have resumed under a UN-brokered deal. On July the 22nd, Russia and Ukraine signed a landmark deal with the UN and Turkey on resuming grain shipments in an attempt to ease a global food crisis in which millions face hunger.
At the invitation of President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, the Secretary General will be in Lviv on Thursday to attend a trilateral meeting with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey and the Ukrainian leader. The Secretary General will then go on to Odessa the next day, where he will visit the port that is one of the three being used as part of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Before returning to New York over the weekend, the Secretary General will be in Istanbul to visit the Joint Coordination Center set up to implement the initiative. As you will all recall, this initiative is part of a deal that also includes the facilitation of Russian grain and fertilizer exports onto the global market.
Is there any possible talk about a possible ceasefire talks, peace agreement in those discussions?
I mean, there will be obviously there are a number of issues that will be raised. The conflict in general, the need for a political solution to this conflict. I have no doubt that the issue of the nuclear power plant, the fact-finding mission, and others will be raised.
In another development, Poland is seeking acknowledgement from Ukraine concerning the 1943 Volhynian massacres. Poland wants Ukraine to admit genocide, as a deputy culture minister says the massacres fit the definition of genocide and Kiev will have to recognize that. Poland's deputy minister of culture and national heritage, Jaroslaw Selin, said the mass murder of Poles by Ukrainian nationalists during the Second World War meets the definition of genocide, and the government in Kiev will have to recognize this sooner or later. Minister Selin adds that this acknowledgement has to come because it's a fact that a political decision was made and implemented for ethnic cleansing, the extermination of the entire national minority that had lived there for centuries. Polish historians say between 100,000 and 130,000 ethnic Poles were massacred by Stefan Bandera's Ukrainian insurgent army. In 2016, the parliament in Warsaw adopted a resolution establishing July the 11th as a day of commemorating that genocide, referring to the date on which the UPA attacked 150 Polish towns in Volhynia and eastern Galicia. The parliament in Kiev responded by denouncing the resolution as counterproductive. Russia's defense ministry says that the United Kingdom requested permission for one of its RC-135 spy planes to fly over Russia, a move it terms as a deliberate provocation. The ministry said that London had sent a notice informing about a planned flight of the RC-135 reconnaissance plane along a route that partly passes over Russian territory. However, the UK Ministry of Defence source, cited by the Reuters news agency, denied that the UK had asked permission to fly a spy plane over Russia. The Russian Defense Ministry said that Russia's Air Force had been tasked with preventing any violations of Russian airspace, adding that the country's Air Force has been given orders to prevent an intrusion. Finland has announced a visa crackdown on Russians as Helsinki says it will restrict the number of visas given to Russians and is calling for an EU-wide ban. The Foreign Ministry announced that it will cut the number of entry visas available to Russians in half, with just 100 tourist permits issued per day. Along with nearby Estonia, Finland has called on the EU to impose a wholesale ban on entry from Russia. Starting on September the 1st, just 500 Finnish visa applications made inside Russia will be processed every day, with 100 allocated to tourists and the remaining 400 for other applicants, including workers, students, and those with family in Finland. Finland. Currently, around 1,000 applications from Russia are processed every day. The ministry said these quotas may be changed at a later date and added that Finland supports the complete suspension of the visa facilitation agreement between the EU and Russia, a move that would more than double application fees for Russians. The three Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have already ceased issuing visas to Russian citizens and are amongst the most vocal proponents of an EU-wide ban. And Estonia says it will prevent most Russians from entering that country with visas issued by Estonian authorities from Thursday this week, cutting off a popular route into Europe's passport-free Schengen zone. Foreign Minister Urmas Rasalu said that all the valid Schengen visas, which except for some humanitarian and family-related cases, will be sanctioned. Russian tourists crossing the border in the eastern city of Narva said Russian citizens should not be made responsible for their government's actions. The EU last month agreed the 7th round of sanctions against Russia since its invasion of Ukraine. Latvia, Lithuania, and the Czech Republic have also stopped issuing visas to most Russians, while, as we've just reported, Finland and Estonia recently called for the EU to do so jointly.
We will sanction all the Schengen visas which are valid currently, except some humanitarian and family-related cases. And it means that we are speaking around 50,000 plus valid visas, and vast majority of them from the 18th of August will be blocked. Persons using these visas will be blocked to enter Estonia. And secondly, what we are considering is indeed also opportunities or momentums to close the Russian border, Russian-Estonian border at all to Russian citizens entering Schengen area or Estonian territory. When these people are going to see Brandenburg Gates, the people are dying under the Russian Federation bombs, and Russian Federation authorities are using the tax money what is paid by these people who are making their tourist trips to Europe. So letting people into one country or Europe is not a human right. And secondly, we have to admit that also Russian society, by and large, also bears a passive moral responsibility for these atrocities which take place in Ukrainian soil. The legal responsibility is on Putin. He's in a circle, and these executioners of genocide. But of course, the moral responsibility lies also on this state and its citizens.
The first ship to depart Ukraine under a deal to resume grain exports from the country 2 weeks ago has docked in the Syrian port city of Tartus. According to site alert imagery from Planet Labs, it shows it docked in that city yesterday morning and was unloading at least part of its cargo of corn in Syria. The Sierra Leone-flagged Rizzoni set sail from Ukraine's Odessa port on August the 1st under a hard-won grain deal, but did not unload in Lebanon as previously planned. Its location had not been clear in recent days, as it has kept its transponder off. The cargo of 26,000 tons of corn had originally been destined for Lebanon, which has been suffering an economic crisis that has plunged about half of its population into food insecurity. However, the original buyer refused the delivery over quality concerns, and the ship sailed back to Turkey, docking in Mersin on August 11 and unloading part of the cargo there. When it set sail again the following day, it did not keep its transponder on. Let's talk now to Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland and permanent representative to the United Nations offices in Geneva, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogo. Good morning to you, Your Excellency. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you.
Yes, let's begin there with some of the things that we've been reporting. Let's start off with this starting momentum for an EU-wide travel ban on Russian citizens, not members of the Russian armed forces. Is this something perhaps unprecedented in your view?
Well, it's not to be, I wouldn't say that is unexpected. It may not even unprecedented. It's just that the scenario, it's fresh in our minds now. But you see, the strategy has all along been to make Putin and the oligarchs to have a pinch of conscience and begin to consider rolling back or rolling out of Ukraine. They've done that for the past 5 months, and it doesn't seem to be working too much. And I think it's in order to begin to expect that a little more pressure, probably addressing this pressure more to the people too, because Europeans and, well, the Russians all enjoy their holidays, and if you make it difficult for them to come out and enjoy themselves, then probably the message would go to their leader, their government, that being turning into a pariah state and a pariah people in Europe, where they're really part of Europe, it's not in the interest of the people. I think understandably, that would be the message that is being sent.
You're a veteran diplomat, ambassador, and in this kind of situation, people have continuously pointed at efforts to be geared towards diplomacy to see to the end of this conflict. But that doesn't, as you pointed out, seem to be quite working. Tomorrow now, the Turkish president, the Ukrainian president, and the UN Secretary General are expected to meet in Lviv to see if they could explore this a bit further. But the Russian president was not invited to that meeting, and no Russian representatives will be there, at least from the information that we have thus far. Do you think this could work, given what you know about how some of these diplomatic mechanisms work out?
Well, in diplomacy, of course, you plan your strategy. Perhaps obviously they do not see any need at this moment to bring everybody, all the parties together, and probably end up quarreling and achieving nothing. So there is this step-by-step approach. You talk to this group, which would be the basis of the meeting involved, and then you see what is their bottom line and what they would accept and what they would accept, and then you take it on to to have a meeting with the Russians. I think that is the strategy that is on the table now, which the Secretary General is using. So that's in order from the point of diplomatic management of conflicts.
Given that scenario, on the other side, of course, you have one which is already working, which is the grain deal that we talked about just before we came on to this interview. In the Joint Coordination Center in Istanbul, you have Ukrainians, you have Russians, you have UN staff, and you have the Turks who are presiding over the entire process of moving these ships out from Ukraine to wherever they intend to go in different parts of the world. And some expected, including some diplomats, expected that could have been used to build, after all these people are in this same center, so that could have been used to build some kind of momentum towards discussions and so on. Why do you think that's possibly proved difficult if it has?
Well, we wouldn't rule that out. It's quite interesting and very good that all parties were able to agree on the issue of dealing with the humanitarian and, let me say, economic aspect of the backlash of the war. That's to get grains out to wherever they are needed. that kind of convergence of interest, I would say convergence of interest because obviously the Russians do not oppose it, the Ukrainians need it, the global community needs that. Maybe that's how it has, well, that's definitely why it has worked. And I am not ruling out that as this process of moving grades begin to really take effect and the good feelings around it, that it may also translate into discussing other issues of the nitty-gritty of the war. Remember that moving grades, it just deals with one little aspect of the humanitarian aspect of the war. So, well, let's not lose hope. Definitely, we must acknowledge that the understanding to move grades by all parties is a good step in the right direction, yeah, and it might lead to other understandings, agreements, which hopefully would get us to where both parties will really come together, not just coming together, but addressing what it is that will make the war end.
If that is so, I remember when last I spoke to you and I asked you the question about Africa being a spectator in all of this. You chuckled then and you said, well, yeah, Africa has to be a spectator. But then, in spite of being spectators, more recently, Africa seems to have been brought into it by the attempt by some of the players to join Africa, especially in terms of ensuring markets and energy supplies. So you had the French President Emmanuel Macron, Sergei Lavrov of Russia, the foreign minister, and then you had a couple of other people visiting. Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, was also in Africa, all within the space of 2 weeks around each other. But the question remains, how do you think Africa should play this? Because it does appear as if, by some default, Africa is now some kind of bride.
Well, let me begin from the point which everybody admits, that what is playing out is a big power attacking a smaller neighbor, contrary to the extant rules now that guides relations between countries. And Africa must not mince words in saying, no, we respect sovereignty, we respect territoriality and territorial integrity. I don't have a problem with that, and Africa should at various levels or wherever that issue comes up, say that categorically, because it will be contrary to our interest if we don't. We are weak states generally. It does mean that if you don't say that it is not right for bigger states to bully smaller states, then it could also be our lot. Anybody can come in and attack African country or African states and all that. So that is there. The issue of the other rules Africa will probably will become part of now. That is this issue of Africa becoming the bride over specific needs. Like I know in Nigeria they were talking about selling gas supplies to Europe just to make sure that they have alternative sources of energy. These are bound to come, and we would take advantage of it. There is no moral reason why we should not. It depends on where we can make our best deals. I would say let's put it, that is my personal observation about this. if anybody wants Nigerian gas and we can put an invest into it, and we get it out to Europe, sells it to who needs it, because there is need for energy in Europe now and various other parts of the country. I mean, the global community. So that becomes the situation of things. That's the way it could go.
Indeed. Ambassador Joseph Ayalogo, Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland and permanent representative to the UN in Geneva. Thank you for your time this morning from the British capital, London. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And still to come on the program, Ukraine's education system shrinks, suffering aftermath of war as thousands of young residents flee. Thanks for staying tuned. The value and volume of Turkey's exports to Russia has risen dramatically from 2021 levels as Turkish companies rush to service the market abandoned by the US and EU corporations. Officials in Brussels told the Financial Times that this is, quote, not nice and not really appropriate, but acknowledge that there's little they can do about it. The latest statistics from the Turkish Trade Ministry show exports to Russia amounting to over $2 billion between May and July, $642 million more than in the same period last year. In July alone, the value of exports rose by 75% year-on-year from $417 to $730 million. It was the largest spike in Turkish exports anywhere. Russia now accounts for 3.9% of all Turkish exports, up from 2.6% last July. Ankara's exports to the US are also up by 25%, and the total value of exports is 13% more than last year. Part of that is down to the devaluation of the Turkish lira, but also due to the embargo against Russia imposed by the US and its EU allies, one Turkey has declined to participate in. Let's talk now to Laddie Williams, who joins me on the program. Morning. Laddie. Well, I must acknowledge that about a week or so ago, you did say this, that the Turks have stepped in to bring, so they're not just playing peacemakers, they're also very shrewd businessmen.
Exactly, they're businessmen, and they're not letting, what's happening, derail them from doing, business with Russia at this point. And at the end of the day, it's still, Russia looking elsewhere, to make their sales. Friendly nations, they're looking at BRICS, and obviously we've seen, Turkey struggle with their economy. We've seen inflation surge there to new highs. They're also struggling, with their lira, losing value. And all of this because they've gone the opposite direction, because Turkey, instead of tightening rates, they've been loosening, which has also, stoked inflation in the country. So at the end of the day, they're still, trying to make a profit with some of these transactions. And Russia is a big market, and they cannot, just let go of Russia like that. So
as others are making are making their exits, so there's a lot of space to fill. Now, in the UK, inflation.
Inflation,
because you just talked about inflation. 40-year high, 10.1%. So
10.1.
They hit the point. They hit the point.
That psychological point.
Our correspondent in London was telling us that we would hit double digits very shortly.
It has finally happened. So it's higher than what analysts actually forecast. They were forecasting about 9.8%, higher than what we had in June. That was about 9.4%. So now it's about a 0.9% uptick increase, and that's stoking that cost of living crisis we're seeing in the UK. They've been struggling with that for a while now. We've been getting back-to-back bleak economic data from the UK, and this is just one of them. And at the end of the day, the BOE also had to raise rates to the highest since about 1995, and that still hasn't reined in inflation yet. They're still struggling. They've had a couple of hikes in the past, but this was the biggest one and we're still seeing inflation coming up quite hot here with double digits. So this would make the BOE actually want to raise rates even more, because they're projecting that inflation should peak at about maybe 13%.
Yeah.
That's what the Bank of England is saying. But it's looking like there's going to be more rate hikes, even though we're seeing, wage rates not matching, inflation at this point. Yeah. So they're really struggling. They're having to pay more for energy at this point. The UK energy price cap is going to get to about £4,000 from £1,900. That's it's heavy.
Double.
Yeah. So now you're going to be having to choose between heating and eating. So that they have a lot to chew on in the UK. It's looking quite tough there.
How are the markets looking?
Well, markets they're not looking bad. Yesterday, we saw the U.S. markets, the Dow Jones and the industrial average, the S&P closed in the green yesterday. It's just the Nasdaq that was a laggard, and the U.S. Europe is not looking bad. It's green already this morning, but we're seeing the U.S. futures pointing downward. Yeah, this morning. The crypto market, Bitcoin, they're still struggling to hold that 24,000 level. We're seeing a battle between the bulls and the bears. And back here, we got a green close yesterday on the NGX, thanks to Boa Cement. That one went up and took the market up with it. We got about 0.16% uptick yesterday. So the markets are not looking bad, but there's still caution in most of the markets. And yeah, obviously oil too. The oil market is not looking any better, but we need that price to go down.
Yeah, but for many reasons.
For many reasons.
Which we've talked about
exactly.
over time. Laddie, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Well, there'll be more, of course, on these and other stories later on. Business Morning and Business Incorporated later on in the day. As children throughout the world go back to school this fall, the academic system in war-torn Ukraine remains crippled by the armed conflict which started there in February. Thousands of young people have been killed, millions of Ukrainians have sought refuge in neighboring countries, and millions more are internally displaced. Classrooms will be reopened in some parts of the country, but for the most, learning will be either remote or unavailable. 7-year-old Arena is eager to get back to classroom learning. The third grader living in Odessa, a port city by the Black Sea, has been out of school since February. There are only 10,000 available slots this year for at least 100,000 school-age children in Odessa eligible for in-person learning. Parents of only 35,000 children are willing to send their kids to school. Because of the ongoing conflict, the only schools allowed to hold in-person classes are those equipped with adequate bomb shelters, air raid siren protocols, and staff members trained in evacuation as well as first aid. Quick look at the sports. Belarusian tennis star Victoria Azarenka is set to join Rafael and Nadal, Coco Gauff, and Iga Swiatek in a pre-US Open exhibition event as part of Tennis Pays for Peace, a program seeking to raise awareness and humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Significantly, the event has been scheduled to take place on Ukraine Independence Day. That's August the 24th at the Louis Armstrong Stadium in New York City. These athletes will compete in a series of singles and mixed doubles matches. Tickets are priced at between $25 and $50, and all of the proceeds will be used to support communities in Ukraine impacted by the Russian invasion, as well as the surrounding regions where millions of refugees have fled. And finally on the program, the Appeals Tribunal of the Gymnastics Ethics Foundation is due to make its decision on Russian athlete Ivan Kuliak by September the 15th. Mr. Kuliak is serving a 1-year suspension for wearing the Z military symbol on his uniform at a Gymnastics World Cup event. He was ordered to return his bronze medal and $500 prize money and pay $2,000 as fine for the violations. Thanks for staying with us. That's our program this morning. My name is Ladi Akeri-Duluale. There's an update of our stories concerning the war in Ukraine at 5 o'clock within the world today. Do watch out for that. But for now, have a pleasant midweek day ahead. Good morning.